Hello and welcome to Ask George with George Dobell and Elizabeth Botcherby, and it's the end of day 2 of the 5th test between India and England in Dharamsala. Well, hi George, how are you?
Hello, the Botch. I'm okay.
Happy with what you saw today?
I don't know how to answer that. I mean, no, not really. I thought that the first day sets up the second day, but it certainly did in this game. And India seized the initiative, and today was just about grinding England noses into the dust, and they did that very effectively.
Yeah, and I know England had the best of the final session, but India will be fairly happy with the lead they've built, won't they?
Yeah. What's the lead? 230 or something?
255.
Is it as many as that? Christ. Well, there you are. I think that to take any positives from the England performance would be kind of absurd. Nicely though, Bashir did. Good though it was to see Ben Stokes bowl again and take a wicket. England are getting hammered. I kind of feel it's unhelpful for them to tell themselves that some things are going well. It's delusionary.
Well, you can read all of George's coverage of England's tour of India and more by subscribing to the Cricketers digital offering, and you can do that via the link in the video description. And we'll be producing these videos throughout the series, and you can submit your questions on social media using the hashtag AskGeorge.
It's a proper rant today, the Botch.
I can't wait. We're going to start things off gently, though. Andrew Frank asks, where did George get that chair from?
It was a gift. That's sorry, I should have read these. It was a gift. I don't know where it's from. I'm sorry.
Lovely. Jack Rule takes us onto cricket, and he asks, should we have just had Ben Stokes bowling from the start?
No, he was injured. I mean, of course not. I'm glad that he has given himself a little while. He's obviously had a very disappointing series, but I'm still glad that he wasn't seduced into coming back too early. He's obviously a special cricketer, and he played for far too long with a damaged knee, and to give himself a proper chance of coming back and being as good as he can be, he needs to go through the rehabilitation process properly. So I'm relieved he didn't force his way back. I'm pleasantly surprised. He still bowled in the series now when he said he wouldn't. And let's see what how he is tomorrow, whether he can bowl again or whether he can walk again. But it's been a long time since we've seen Ben Stokes bowl, and even longer since we've seen him bowl pain-free. So that was nice to see, but it wasn't terribly relevant to the result, I fear.
Yeah, what did you make of the few overs he sent down today?
Well, it was a reminder that he's a very good cricketer, but we kind of already knew that. I mean, the first ball he bowled was a peach. You do wonder moments like that what the other bowlers think. Yeah, because it did pitch and nip away a little bit off the pitch, I think, to hit the top of off. I mean, it's kind of perfection, isn't it? It wouldn't be human nature if they didn't think, why couldn't I get the ball to do that? But yeah, it's a reminder of what a very good cricketer he is.
Sahil Oberoi asks, does Ben Stokes justify his place in the team beyond his captaincy?
I mean, have you ever watched England play cricket? I don't really know how to answer that. I mean, I guess it's meant to be provocative, or everyone's entitled to their opinions, but it's very hard for me to take any opinion seriously if you couldn't recognise what a good cricketer Ben Stokes is. I mean, apart from the 2 World Cup finals that he's won for England, admittedly, in different formats, he's done quite a lot of remarkable things with the bat and the ball. And while he is having a lean series, you could say that about every cricketer at some stage or another. I think it would be, I mean, he's the first person I'd pick. He'd get in a World 11 of us picking it. I mean, maybe not on current form, but you'd still pick him. And do you know what? I think every captain in world cricket would.
Do you think there's any, or there should be any concern about his form during the series with the bat?
Yeah, I do. I think that's a different question, though. That's about, Joe Root's had a bad series by his standards. He's still obviously a very good player, isn't he? Yes, I don't think they're getting the technical support that they should be. I don't know that he's concentrating on his batting enough. What's he averaging now? 35, 36? I honestly think he's good enough to be averaging 10 more than that, if not more. He's obviously not a player who's particularly interested in his average. That's one of his many qualities, and that's fine, but he's not scoring enough runs. And he is not scoring enough runs quite consistently. So I do think that they might want to think about why that is. Personally, I think he should go up the order. I wouldn't be against him swapping with Ollie Pope. I think he's a very, very good player of fast bowling. Spin's obviously always been a struggle, but I thought he had worked on it really hard from about 2015, 16 onwards and become very good for a while. And it looks as if he needs some remedial work there. But he's always going to struggle against really good off spin, I think, and that's fine. He can't pick Kuldeep. It's a problem. I would back him to overcome it, but you do have to work on these things. But he will. I mean, he is a worker. But short-term form issues are not the same as long-term concerns.
Nick Hill asks, England have been no better than they were in 2016 and 2021 in the last 3 tests, have they? Surely Stokes cannot be immune to criticism for the way England have folded.
Yeah, I don't strongly disagree with any of that. We could argue about details about whether they've been better or not. I think in 16 they actually batted in their first innings quite often quite well. They weren't able to bowl India out. And they got ground down in a fairly attritional series. So it was different, but I'm not going to argue with the premise of the question. 2021, I mean, obviously they won the first test, again, quite traditional and attritional. And then the series became quite extreme in terms of the conditions and they were blown away. So I don't particularly disagree. I would say there, as I've said every day, really, that there have been glimpses of times when they could have done better in this series. But, these things, I remember, because I'm very old, Frank Bruno hurting Mike Tyson. And increasingly, I think England are Frank Bruno. They've got a punch. They haven't got a chin. That's probably really harsh on Frank Bruno. He was a world champion. I definitely don't mean to be disrespectful. But the point being that he did very briefly hurt Mike Tyson and it just seemed to annoy him. Maybe it's been the same with India. England beat them from behind, of course, in the first test. And there have been moments when Rohit has realised his side needed to steel themselves and redouble their efforts, and he's done that really well. And as the series has gone on, it's become more and more one-sided.
Yeah, and I think this was something that came up during the 4th test. I think in between Astral Weeks and ABBA, you mentioned that you're not particularly sold on Brendon McCullum. I was wondering what you meant by that and what you've made of kind of the Stokes-McCullum era to date, having, a sizable period to kind of reflect on now.
Okay, so Brendon McCullum as a player was properly inspirational. And an expression I've used before is the McCullumization of cricket, which happened from sort of, 14 onwards for a few years. They played really inspiring cricket, his New Zealand side, at the 2015 World Cup. And he was incredible to watch. Obviously, as a batter, but mainly in the field, is what I was going to mention. Just there were times when I remember wanting to write about him in the field somewhere. He didn't really do anything in the game, and the idea was kind of rubbished a little bit. But he was so brave and committed, and leading from example in that way that it was brilliant. And at the same time, he was very nice. So I just remember before England played New Zealand in Wellington, I think it was. Yes, it was Wellington, and they got absolutely stuffed. Owen Morgan was really struggling, and Brendon McCullum was asked in a press conference, "What do you think of Owen Morgan?" And I swear to you, if that had been asked at the same stage to an Australian captain, he would have said, "Looks to me like he's under a lot of pressure. Looks to me like he's struggling," all this sort of thing. Brendon McCullum said something along the lines of, which is so Brendon McCullum, by the way, tough times don't last, tough guys do. I mean, classic McCullum. It's a poster, isn't it? But it was also a classy way of not having to go at an opposition individual and backing your team just to be good enough to win without the bullshit. And that's what that New Zealand side did. They were really, really good without being unpleasant. And the Australian side at the time was definitely really good, but not always terribly likable in some ways. And Australian people watching this will be saying, "Oh, you soft Kiwi, pommy, whatever they want to call me, git, that who gives a toss? We won." And they did, and they were brilliant. But I'm going to stick with what I said. I think New Zealand were the more likable side. I would say that. I'm a New Zealander. But so I've got a lot of respect for Brendon McCullum, and he does have huge charisma. He really does. I don't think he's a good coach at all. I think he's an absolute myth of a man. It's an absolute. What does he do? He talks in these sort of cliched, inspirational poster nonsense. He's got them deluded into thinking they're better than they are. There's no insight or honesty about their faults. And because of that, there's no attempt to rectify them. And I really do think English cricket needs to take a deep breath and have an honest conversation about where it really is, because they're not that good. I mean, I would love that to be proved wrong. But it is over a year since they've won a T20 international series. It is over a year since they've won a test series. They are 8th in the World Test Championship table. And they did get a hell of a stuffing in the ODI World Cup. So what are we basing all this feel-good stuff on? What's it based on? I'll tell you what it's based on. Try not to swear. But there's a lot of hyperbole. And I get the impression that people are a bit reluctant to call it out because it's sort of feel-good. But I don't know. Increasingly, they look like a pig wearing lipstick. I don't know. There's you know what I'm saying. I hope I gave enough of the credit for the good stuff, because I don't want to just slag the guy off. I think he's genuinely done brilliant things for the game of cricket. I hope that comes across. But he's not a coach. I think my mum's terrific. I don't want to make her England coach. She's a New Zealander too.
Would be fun though.
It would.
Well, Andy comes in with a similar theme. It says, by scoring at a faster rate than England and doubling their first innings total, are India taking it upon themselves to save Test cricket?
It's lovely how they've learned from England. It's really beautiful how England have inspired India to play so well. Well done. Well done. This is why I don't read the comments.
What do you think the big difference has been between India and England with the bat this series? Has it just been India's ability to build partnerships?
They're better at cricket. Well, it's a big thing. I think they've been prepared. India have been more prepared to earn the right to attack, because Rohit, for example, has played himself in. We know that Rohit is an explosive batter with all the shots in the world, but he's played himself in. And actually, Jaswal did at the start of the series. He seems to be getting ever more impatient as his confidence has grown naturally. But I think they earned the right to play the shots they have. And I think that as we saw today, there were periods when they went on the attack and really pulverized England. But there were other times when they built in fairly traditional fashion. They're a good side that are worried, I think, more about the overall score and the result rather than retweets and social media clicks. So I do think England have started to believe their own hype a little bit. And there's some lovely things about England. This is the problem, that everything becomes so binary. You're either for or against. You're red or blue. You're black or white. It's nonsense. You can have, multitudes of feelings. But yeah, basically India. And the other thing is they've got a very good bowling attack. And, and it gives them some confidence with the bat. So there's quite a lot that they're doing right, but basically they're the better side.
Occidental Tourist asks, will England knuckle down in their second innings in an attempt to force India to bat again?
Well, I mean, I'm sure they'll try and make... it looks like a very good wicket still. I mean, they should have... The problem in this game has not been their bowling, really. It's been England's first innings batting. You know, they had an opportunity to score a lot of runs. What is par? What was par on that first day? 450? To be fair, it was difficult in the first hour, but it always is, really. So yeah, if you mean will they knuckle down and play differently? Of course they won't. I mean, Zach Crawley and Ben Duckett are going to play the way they play. Hopefully, Ollie Pope and Joe Root play in a slightly different way. But you know what Johnny Bairstow's going to be like. You know, he will go on the attack, and they're not going to change. You know, to be fair to them, there's never been any inconsistency in their approach. This is what I mean. I wish there would be. That wouldn't be a sign of weakness. That would be a sign of thought and intelligence.
Snigd asks, how good has Bashir been? He's probably the best overseas spinner to have visited India since Graham Swan.
I'm not even sure Graham Swan was the best spinner on that tour. I say this as Graham Swan's biggest fan, but a few weeks ago, I watched, fearsome geek that I am, some highlights of the Mumbai test in 2012. God, I'd almost forgotten how good Monty was. Wow. In that test. And actually, Graham Swan, he certainly took one wicket with a full toss. Anyway, neither here nor there. Graham Swan's obviously, well, not obviously, he's the best spinner England have had in my lifetime. But, you know, there have been other bowlers. Fraser for Australia, for example, didn't he? He took a 7 for, didn't he? I mean, you know, there have been other overseas spinners who have gone to India and done pretty well. So I don't know about the best in Swan. I really don't. Yeah, I think there are Australia and New Zealand as well would have various examples. I'm trying to remember how Shakib has done in India, and I can't off the top of my head. But you know what I mean. So I don't know about that. But how has Shoaib done? He's done terrifically. But I mean, in the context of the fact that he was, you know, he's a kid really learning his trade at a very high level. I think he's overachieved. I'm sure people in India don't really understand how it was that someone with so little experience was picked, and it's because England has a broken domestic system. But I think he's shown a lot, and I think he's England's #1 at this stage.
Neil Varani asks, with his comments that county performances were irrelevant to a test tour in India, can Kean McCullum use this series to request more county chances for Bashir and Hartley?
Well, it's completely reasonable for them to have that conversation. I mean, it's got to be a symbiotic relationship with the counties in England, and you would hope that they would work together. Equally, Key's not completely wrong that, you know, it's not completely wrong to say that county performances shouldn't predict who is going to do well for England and India. I mean, that would be absurd to claim the other way around. But yeah, to say they need to play shows a vast misunderstanding of the issues and the problems, which is another reason why I'm always, you've got to be so careful with appointing overseas coaches. I mean, it'd be different if it was, say, I don't know, Marcus North or someone who's been working in English cricket for a few years now and has a decent understanding of it, or Mickey Arthur even. But I don't see Brendon McCullum going to a lot of county cricket. I don't even think he's particularly interested in that. So yeah, I take those opinions with a pinch of salt. It would be really nice if Rob Key was reflecting on the issues and saying, do you know what the problem is? We've got this big white ball window in the middle of the season, but I don't want to bang on about the same things every day. But, you know, you don't have to do it that way. You could play your white ball cricket on Friday nights, for example, in the prime weeks of the season and still leave days free to play some championship cricket. I mean, you could do that. It did used to happen. It's really not that impossible. So it would be nice if he appreciated the difficulty that the ECB have given the counties, but the counties are responsible, of course, as well, for the completely dysfunctional schedule and system that we have. I'll say it again and again, if you get the county game right, the England team will almost look after itself.
Well, Varish Mulwad asks, are there things India and Australia are doing right in their first-class setup that you'd want England to replicate?
I don't know enough about it. I'm not sure I've ever seen, I suppose I've seen IPL, but I don't know how much domestic cricket I've seen in either of those countries of Big Bash. Not sure I've ever been to a Shield game. Might have done, but so I don't know enough about it, but I wouldn't really compare the systems. So we know that cricket is a very, very popular game in India, wildly so. And it's also a big sport still in Australia. It's a niche sport in England. What is that stat about? It's heavily over-reliant on the private schools to produce its players. I think it's more than 50% of county cricketers have been privately educated at some stage. And there's only, I think it's 9% of kids in the UK are privately educated. So in England, because of the inequities of the system, and again, we've sort of talked about this before, it's become very, very niche and reliant on a tiny pool. It's not as big a sport as football. It's not, what is it compared to football? A tenth of the size, probably less than that. So it's not really comparable. But are there things that you could learn? I don't know. As I understand it, the first-class systems in Australia and India have similar pressures and weaknesses as well. But I would always urge that English cricket should not be trying to copy what goes on elsewhere. It should have been unashamedly different. It should have revelled in the geographical mix of the 18 counties and aspired to more, maybe, and promotion and relegation rather than other systems, I think could be marvellous. So it pains me that we seem to copy, particularly going, the route of T20s. The other day, I was thinking about it. The what's it called? The Super Smash, whatever, the New Zealand T20 competition clashes with the Big Bash. The Big Bash clashes with the Pakistan PSL, the I-20, the South Africa competition, and then the BPL as well. Well, the BPL, sorry, won't clash with the Big Bash, but they all clash at some stage, yeah? There's so much cricket going on, and someone at the ECB, or everyone at the ECB, has thought, do you know what we should do? We should commit our future to another competition, which is absolutely at saturation point all around the world. Everyone else in the world is thinking, how do England still fill their grounds with Test cricket? How do they get so many great crowds for their ODIs? And yet in England, we're thinking, well, we've got to abandon this and do something different. They should unashamedly do it their own way.
And Don Topley asks, if we had a combined 11 from both India and England this series, do you think England would have a representative?
It's a really good question. Hello, Donald. I'm sure he would have said the follow-up saying, Reece should have been in it. Do you know what? On the basis of this series, you would struggle to disagree with that. I would say Ben Foakes. I think most would agree he's been the best keeper. India on their second keeper of the series, of course, and probably their third choice keeper. But he's, third choice at the start of the series. But he's done really, really well. So you couldn't really argue if it was an India 11. I think in the grand scheme of things, if you weren't just judging on these 5 tests, I would always make a case for Stokes and Root, and probably Foakes as well. But the bowling attack would be clearly Indian, and Zach Crawley's had a decent series, but he's not pushing either of the Indian openers out, is he? So yeah, that is a really interesting way of putting it. It's pretty painful when you put it that way, isn't it?
Who would you pick as your player of the series? I know we've still got a couple of days to go, but it's probably not going to change much.
Probably Jaiswal, but Bumrah had a big influence. Don't know, because actually Bumrah was magnificent in a game that India lost. And you couldn't really go wrong with, Jadeja. I mean, these things don't really matter because it's a team game. But I think you'd have to say Jaiswal, actually. The more I think about it, that would be, he said, how many runs he scored? A preposterous number. Too many to count. That's how many I'm going to say. And every time he turned around, he scored more. He's probably had his last innings. He might not have done. But yeah, I think so. What would you say?
Jaiswal or Kuldeep, I think.
Well, that's a good shout. Kuldeep's coming into it more and more, isn't he? He's certainly been brilliant. People were saying to me on Twitter that he didn't bowl that well. England just played it. The ball to Zach Crawley belongs in a museum. Utterly beautiful. So one of the moments of the series, I thought. Yeah, good shout. Good shout, the Botch. All right for you. Look how happy she looks. She's got the weekend off.
I know. Can't wait. Bit of rugby.
Very nice too.
Well, thanks, George. And we'll be back with more Ask George on day 3.
Cheers.